Sometimes the people who should stand by you are the first ones to walk away. At 61, Marcus Webb had learned this truth the hard way. The small apartment he rented on the east side felt more like a waiting room than a home. 2 bedrooms, though he only needed one, a kitchen he barely used, furniture that came with the place. Nothing personal except for a few photographs on the bookshelf. His children, when they were young, smiling and unaware of how distant they would all become. He worked as a construction supervisor for a regional building company, the same job he'd held for nearly 20 years. Good pay, decent benefits, nothing remarkable. He woke at 5:30 each morning, made coffee in the same chip mug, and drove to whatever site needed his attention that day. The work was physical enough to keep him tired, repetitive enough to let his mind wander. The divorce had been finalized 2 years ago, not bitter, just sad. He and Diane had simply run out of things to say to each other. 32 years of marriage dissolved into polite signatures on legal documents. She'd moved to Arizona to be closer to her sister. They texted occasionally, mostly about the kids, though there wasn't much to say there either. Claire was 34 now, worked in marketing for a tech company in the city, lived in a renovated loft with her teenage daughter. She was successful, independent, and hadn't called Marcus in 4 months. Not out of cruelty, he thought, but out of busyness. Or maybe indifference. He wasn't sure which hurt more. Owen was 31, had moved to the coast after college and stayed there. Married young, 2 children, Marcus had only met twice. Owen sent Christmas cards with family photos. Strangers' faces arranged on glossy paper. The phone calls had stopped years ago. Marcus told himself it was natural that children grew up and built their own lives. But late at night, alone in that quiet apartment, he wondered if he'd failed them somehow. If the distance was his fault. If working too many hours and avoiding difficult conversations had cost him the only relationships that mattered. His grandfather's funeral came as a surprise 3 weeks ago. Marcus hadn't known the old man was sick. Nobody had told him. The funeral was small, held at a church Marcus didn't recognize in a town 2 hours away. He'd sat in the back pew watching relatives he barely knew weep and embrace. His father had died when Marcus was 23, so the connection to his father's side of the family had always been thin, threads that frayed with time and neglect. After the service, the lawyer gathered everyone in the church basement for the reading of the will. Marcus remembered the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the smell of stale coffee, the rows of folding chairs. His uncle Victor sat in the front row with his wife, his father's younger brother, a man who'd built a successful car dealership and wore that success like armor. 2 cousins Marcus hadn't spoken to in a decade sat nearby, an aunt he vaguely remembered from childhood gatherings. Maybe 15 people total. The lawyer was a tired-looking woman in her 50s who opened a manila folder and began reading in a careful, measured voice. Small bequests to various relatives, a few thousand here and there, some personal items distributed among the grandchildren. Then came the part that changed everything. To my grandson, Marcus Webb, I leave the entirety of my estate located at 1247 Hollowbrook Road, including the main house, all outbuildings, and the surrounding 43 acres, along with all contents therein. The room went silent. Marcus looked up from his hands, confused. The estate? He hadn't even known his grandfather still owned property. The old man had been living in a nursing home for the past 5 years. Victor stood up immediately, his face already reddening. That can't be right. The lawyer looked over her reading glasses, expression neutral. It's quite clear, I'm afraid. The property in its entirety goes to Marcus Webb. Why him? Derek demanded from his seat. What about the rest of us? The lawyer simply folded the document. Those were his wishes. Marcus tried to speak, to say he didn't understand, that there must be some mistake. But Victor turned on him with a look of pure fury, eyes bright with something that went beyond anger into betrayal. You must have manipulated him, convinced him somehow. I barely knew him. Marcus's voice came out quieter than he intended. I haven't seen him in years. Exactly. Victor's wife touched his arm, trying to calm him, but he shook her off. None of us knew him well. So why you? There was no answer to that question. The lawyer handed Marcus an envelope containing the deed, a set of keys, and an address. The other relatives filed out of the room without looking at him. Victor paused at the door, jaw tight. Don't think this is over. That had been 3 weeks ago. Since then, Marcus's phone had gone quiet, texts went unanswered, calls went to voicemail. Even Claire, who'd attended the funeral, had stopped responding. He tried to explain that he hadn't asked for the inheritance, hadn't even wanted it, but nobody seemed interested in listening. The isolation deepened the hollow feeling that had lived in his chest since the divorce. He'd never been good at making friends. Work colleagues were friendly but distant. His evenings were spent alone, eating simple meals and watching television he didn't care about. The inheritance felt like another burden he hadn't asked for. A crumbling estate in the middle of nowhere that probably needed tens of thousands of dollars in repairs. He considered just signing it over to Victor, letting the family divide it up and be done with the whole mess. But something stopped him. Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe it was curiosity, or maybe deep down he wanted to understand why his grandfather, a man he'd seen maybe 5 times in his life, had chosen him. On a gray Saturday morning in late October, Marcus loaded a duffel bag into his truck and drove out to see the place for himself. The drive took him through the outskirts of the city, past suburbs that thinned into farmland, and finally into dense woodland. The GPS guided him down increasingly narrow roads until he turned onto an unmarked gravel drive that wound through towering oaks and maples. Autumn leaves covered the ground in thick drifts of red and gold. After half a mile, the trees opened up, and Marcus saw it. The mansion stood like something from another era. Gothic revival architecture, steep gables and pointed arches, 3 stories of gray stone covered in climbing ivy. A wide front porch with ornate columns, several of them cracked. Windows, dozens of them, many broken or missing entirely. The roof sagged in places, shingles scattered across the overgrown lawn. It should have been beautiful. Marcus could see that the bones of something grand were still there, but time and neglect had turned it into something haunted and sad. He parked his truck in what had once been a circular drive, now mostly reclaimed by weeds. When he stepped out, the silence was absolute except for the wind moving through the trees. No traffic sounds, no neighbors, no signs of life. Marcus stood there for a long moment, keys in his hand, looking up at the house his family had cut him off for inheriting. The house that held some secret they didn't want him to find. He walked slowly up the front steps, testing each one before putting his full weight on it. The porch boards creaked, but held. The front door was oak, heavy, carved with intricate patterns now softened by decay. The key turned with difficulty in the old lock. The door swung open with a long groan. Marcus stepped inside and stopped, overwhelmed by the smell of dust and mildew and time itself. The entry hall stretched before him, once elegant, now ruined. A grand staircase curved upward into darkness. Wallpaper peeled from the walls in long strips. Furniture sat draped in stained sheets like ghosts waiting. He stood in the doorway of his inheritance and felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. This house held secrets. He could feel it in the stillness, in the way shadows gathered in corners. Whatever his grandfather wanted him to find, it was waiting somewhere in these rooms. Marcus took a breath and stepped fully inside. The air felt thick, as though decades of silence had taken on physical weight. He moved slowly through the entry hall, his footsteps echoing on warped hardwood floors. Dust motes danced in weak light filtering through grimy windows. The parlor opened to his right. He stepped inside, taking in the remnants of what must have once been an impressive room. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, its mantel carved with elaborate designs. Furniture sat in clusters, a sofa with springs poking through faded upholstery, chairs with broken legs, side tables covered in water stains. A crystal chandelier hung at an angle overhead, several of its arms missing. Marcus ran his finger along a bookshelf. The dust was thick as felt. He pulled back a sheet covering what turned out to be a piano. Several keys were missing, and when he pressed one of the remaining ones, it produced no sound at all. The dining room came next. A long table stretched the length of the space, surrounded by high-backed chairs. China cabinets lined the walls, their glass doors fogged with age. Through them, he could see ghostly shapes of dishes and serving pieces. One cabinet door hung open, revealing empty shelves where something had been removed or had fallen and broken. The kitchen was at the back of the house. Ancient appliances, a massive cast-iron stove, an ice box that predated electric refrigerators, a deep farmhouse sink with a hand pump. Cabinet doors hung askew. The linoleum floor had curled up at the edges. A mouse skittered across the counter when he entered, disappearing into a hole in the baseboard. Marcus climbed the main staircase carefully, testing each step. Several groaned under his weight. One cracked ominously but held. The second-floor hallway stretched in both directions, lined with closed doors. He opened them one by one. Bedrooms, mostly empty. A bathroom with fixtures so old they looked like museum pieces. A linen closet filled with rotting sheets and blankets. At the end of the hall, he found what must have been his grandfather's study. Unlike the other rooms, this one felt intentional, personal. A large desk sat facing the window, its surface clear except for a layer of dust. Built-in bookshelves covered two walls, still filled with volumes. A leather chair, cracked and faded, sat behind the desk. A reading lamp with a green glass shade perched on one corner. Marcus entered slowly, feeling as though he was intruding on private space. He moved to the bookshelves, reading the spines. History, philosophy, literature. Books in languages he couldn't identify. Some of the volumes looked expensive, leather-bound with gilt lettering. He was reaching for one when his hand brushed against the shelf itself, and he felt something give slightly. A small section of the bookshelf shifted inward with a soft click. Marcus froze. He pressed against the shelf again, more deliberately this time. The entire section, about 2 feet wide, pushed back a fraction of an inch, then swung open on hidden hinges. Behind it was a compartment carved directly into the wall. His heart beating faster, Marcus pulled the hidden panel fully open. The compartment was perhaps a foot deep and 2 feet across. Inside, stacked neatly, were bundles of papers tied with string that had once been white but had yellowed with age. He reached in and carefully lifted out the top bundle. The string crumbled at his touch. The papers were letters, dozens of them, written in various hands on different types of paper. Some on formal stationery, others on plain notebook pages, a few on what looked like torn scraps. Marcus carried the bundle to the desk and set it down gently. He untied what remained of the string and spread out the letters. They were arranged chronologically, he realized. The dates ranged from 1932 to 1935. He picked up the first letter and began to read. Dear Mr. Webb, I cannot adequately express my gratitude for the sanctuary you have provided. When I arrived at your estate 3 months ago, I was penniless and without hope. The gallery had closed. My paintings were worthless in this economy, and I had nowhere to turn. You took me in without question, gave me a room, meals, and most importantly, the space and time to continue my work. I am departing now with a commission secured in Philadelphia, but I will never forget what you did for me during the darkest period of my life. With deepest thanks, F.K. Marcus read it again slowly. Sanctuary. His grandfather had provided sanctuary. He picked up another letter. Mr. Webb, my family and I stayed in your home for 6 weeks while I recovered from the injury that cost me my job at the factory. You asked for nothing in return. You fed my children when I could not. You gave my wife hope when I had none to give her. We are leaving now for my brother's farm in Iowa, but we will remember your kindness forever. May God bless you for what you do. J.R., another letter. To our gracious host, the 3 months we spent at your estate were a gift beyond measure. As a composer whose work was deemed too political, too dangerous, I had fled my home country with nothing but the clothes I wore. You provided not just shelter, but a piano, paper, time, and encouragement. The symphony I completed while under your roof has now been accepted for performance. I owe you my art and perhaps my life. With eternal gratitude, H.W. Marcus sat down heavily in the desk chair, dust rising around him. Letter after letter told similar stories. Artists, musicians, writers, families who had lost everything. People fleeing persecution or poverty or both. All of them thanking his grandfather for taking them in, for providing refuge when they had nowhere else to go. The grandfather he remembered had been stern, distant, formal. Marcus had visited this estate only a handful of times as a child, and the old man had always seemed uncomfortable with children, speaking to Marcus in brief, awkward exchanges before retreating to this very study. But these letters painted a completely different picture. Someone warm, generous, someone who had quietly opened his home to desperate people during one of the darkest periods in American history. Marcus spread more letters across the desk, dozens of them, maybe over 100, all expressing gratitude for the refuge, the safe haven, the sanctuary, references to stays lasting weeks or months, mentions of other guests, of shared meals, of artistic collaboration and mutual support. His grandfather had been running some kind of underground shelter during the Great Depression, and nobody in the family had ever mentioned it, not once. Marcus thought about the hostile faces at the will reading, the anger, the accusations. Had they known about this? Was this why the house had been closed up, abandoned, left to rot for decades? He pulled out his phone and took photographs of several letters. Then he carefully stacked them and placed them back in the hidden compartment. There might be more. There must be more. He stood and looked around the study with new eyes. If his grandfather had hidden this compartment, what else might be concealed in this house? Marcus tried to call Claire. The phone rang 4 times and went to voicemail. "Hey, it's me. I'm at the estate. I found something important about your great-grandfather. Call me back when you can." He knew she wouldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But that was all right. He was going to figure this out on his own. Marcus looked out the study window at the overgrown grounds, the tangled gardens, the forest pressing in on all sides. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. He decided to stay the night. The house had no heat, no electricity, no running water, but his truck had blankets and he had a flashlight. He wasn't ready to leave yet. There were more secrets here. He could feel them in the walls, under the floors, behind every closed door. And for the first time in a very long time, Marcus Webb felt something other than emptiness. He felt purpose. Marcus woke to pale morning light filtering through broken blinds. He'd slept in his clothes on top of the bare mattress in the master bedroom, wrapped in blankets from his truck. His back ached from the sagging springs, and his breath fogged in the cold air. Outside the window, fog hung low over the grounds, turning the landscape ghostly and indistinct. He sat up slowly, rubbing his face. The house creaked and settled around him, morning sounds of old wood adjusting to temperature changes. After a cold breakfast of granola bars and bottled water from his truck, Marcus returned to the second floor. He'd only scratched the surface yesterday. The master bedroom deserved a thorough search. The room was large, dominated by a 4-poster bed frame that had lost its canopy fabric to time and moths. A dresser stood against one wall, its mirror cracked diagonally. A wardrobe occupied the corner near the window, its dark wood still solid despite years of neglect. Marcus started with the dresser drawers. Most were empty or contained only remnants: moth-eaten socks, undershirts yellowed with age, a few loose buttons. The bottom drawer stuck. He yanked harder, and it came free with a screech of wood on wood. Inside was nothing but old newspapers used as liner, dating back to the 1940s. He pulled them out carefully, planning to discard them, then stopped. Beneath the newspapers, the drawer bottom looked oddly thick. Marcus ran his fingers along the edges. There, a slight gap. He pressed down on one end, and the other end lifted up. A false bottom. His pulse quickened as he removed the wooden panel. Underneath lay a leather-bound ledger, its cover worn smooth with handling. He lifted it out reverently and carried it to the window where the light was better. The leather was good quality, the kind that lasted. He opened it carefully. The first page was labeled in neat handwriting: Guest Registry, 1931 to 1942. Marcus turned the page and found himself looking at a detailed accounting system. Columns ran across each page: name, date of arrival, date of departure, occupation, and notes. The entries began in October 1931. Harold Finch, painter. Arrived 12th October 1931. Departed 3rd December 1931. Needed studio space and materials. Completed series of 6 landscapes. Margaret Foster and 3 children. Arrived 20th October 1931. Departed 15th November 1931. Husband killed in factory accident. No family support. Arranged position as housekeeper in Boston. Entry after entry, page after page. Marcus turned through them slowly, his amazement growing. This wasn't just a few people helped here and there. This was systematic, organized. His grandfather had been running a full operation. Some stays were brief, a week or two. Others lasted months. The occupations varied widely. Painters, composers, poets, union organizers, teachers, professors, factory workers, farmers who'd lost their land. The notes beside each name told compressed stories of hardship and hope. Victor Laurent, composer, arrived 15th March 1933, departed 2nd August 1933, fled political persecution in home country, completed symphony in East Bedroom, secured position with orchestra in New York. The Kowalski family arrived 1st of June 1934, departed 10th September 1934, father blacklisted for union activities, family evicted, children tutored by other guests, father found work in Chicago. Dorothy Ashworth, writer, arrived 12th January 1935, departed 20th May 1935, published work deemed subversive, lost university position, completed manuscript of first novel, contract secured with publisher. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, the ledger open on his lap. He pulled out his phone and began searching for names. Harold Finch, the first entry. He found a brief biography on an art history website. Finch had become a respected landscape painter in the 1940s, his work now in several museum collections. His early career was listed as obscure, with a note that he'd found his artistic voice during the Depression years. Victor Laurent, several entries came up, a composer whose work had been performed by major orchestras. One biography mentioned he'd immigrated from Europe in the early 1930s, found refuge with a private patron, and completed his breakthrough symphony in 1933. Dorothy Ashworth. Marcus found an obituary from 1978. She'd become a notable author, writing about labor movements and social justice. Her first novel, published in 1905, had been controversial but critically acclaimed. No mention of where she'd written it. He searched more names. Not all of them appeared in his searches. Many had probably lived quiet lives, unknown beyond their own circles. But enough came up to confirm what the ledger was telling him. His grandfather had sheltered people who went on to make meaningful contributions to art, culture, and society. People who might have disappeared into poverty, or worse, without his intervention. And he'd done it quietly, asking for no recognition, no public acknowledgement. Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out over the estate grounds. He tried to imagine this place in the 1930s, not abandoned and overgrown, but alive, full of people, artists working in the rooms, children playing in the gardens, families sharing meals, conversations about art and politics and survival. His grandfather moving through it all, quietly making it possible. Why had the family erased this history? Marcus thought about his own father, who died young. Had he known about any of this? Had he disapproved? The family Marcus remembered from childhood had been focused on respectability, on business success, on maintaining appearances. His uncle Victor ran a car dealership. His cousins worked in real estate and finance. This kind of activism, this shelter for controversial figures and labor organizers and political refugees, it didn't fit with the family image they'd cultivated. Maybe they'd been ashamed, or maybe they'd been afraid. Marcus felt a surge of anger at his relatives. His grandfather had done something remarkable, something brave, and they'd buried it out of embarrassment or fear. He looked down at the ledger in his hands. This was real history, important history. It deserved to be known. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted his thoughts. Marcus walked to the window and looked down. A car was pulling up the drive, not Victor's. This was an old pickup truck, faded blue paint, some rust around the wheel wells. An elderly man climbed out slowly, gray hair, weathered face, work clothes. He walked with a slight limp, using a cane for support. He stood looking up at the mansion for a long moment, then started toward the front door. Marcus went downstairs and opened the door before the man could knock. "You must be Samuel's grandson." The man's voice was rough but kind. "I'm Hank Morrison. Worked on this place back in 65, 66. Marcus stepped back, gesturing him inside. "How did you know I was here?" "Small town, word travels. Heard someone who's staying at the old Webb place. Figured it had to be family." Hank walked through the entry hall slowly, looking around with something like reverence. "I remember this. We fixed these stairs, replaced windows. Samuel said he wanted the house ready, but he never explained for what." Marcus led him to the study. He wasn't sure why, but something about this man felt trustworthy. Maybe it was the way he spoke about his grandfather, not with distance or embarrassment, but with warmth. How well did you know him? Hank lowered himself into a chair, setting his cane aside. Well enough. I was 17 when he hired me, just out of high school. Taught me carpentry while we did repairs on the East Wing. He was different, kind, but sad. Like he carried weight nobody else could see. Marcus showed him the letters. Hank read slowly, eyes widening. Lord have mercy. He was helping people. All those years, people whispered about Samuel being strange, maybe dangerous. He was running a refuge. Marcus showed him the ledger. Hank turned through pages carefully, reading names and notes. This is remarkable. All these people. Some of these names, I recognize them. Victor Laurent, the composer. Dorothy Ashworth, the writer. They stayed here? According to this, yes. Hank looked up at Marcus, something new in his expression. Your grandfather was a hero, and your family buried it. I'm starting to understand that. What are you going to do? Marcus hadn't formed the plan yet, but the words came out with certainty. I'm going to restore this place. Document what happened here. Make sure people know what my grandfather did. That's going to take money. Time. Work. I know. Hank stood, picking up his cane. I've still got the original blueprints from when we did repairs. If you're serious about restoring this place, I can help. I'm retired, got nothing but time and skills. I can't afford to pay you. Didn't ask for pay. Samuel gave me my start in carpentry. This is how I pay him back. Hank grinned. Plus, I've been bored out of my mind in retirement. They spent the afternoon walking through the house. Hank pointed out structural problems, beams that needed replacing, foundation cracks that needed addressing, roof sections that were beyond repair. But his assessment was hopeful. Bones are good. She can be saved. By evening, they'd made a comprehensive list of repairs. Marcus felt something shift inside him. He wasn't alone in this anymore. He had an ally who understood both the physical building and his grandfather's legacy. As Hank prepared to leave, he paused at the door. There's a storm coming in tomorrow night. Big one. You planning to stay here? Yes. All right. I'll come back day after tomorrow with tools. We'll start stabilizing the structure. He looked at Marcus seriously. Your family is going to fight this. You know that, right? I know. Good, as long as you're prepared. After Hank left, Marcus stood in the entry hall listening to the silence. The house felt different now. Less like a burden, more like a responsibility he'd chosen to accept. He called Claire again. This time he left a longer message, explaining about the ledger, the names he'd found, the proof that Samuel had sheltered over 100 people during the Depression. Please call me back. This is important. But his phone stayed silent. That night, Marcus sat in the study reading more letters by flashlight, learning the stories, understanding more deeply what his grandfather had built here and what it had cost him. Outside, the wind picked up. The weather was changing. The storm Hank predicted arrived on the third night. Marcus woke to the sound of rain pounding against windows, wind howling through gaps in the roof. He lay in the darkness, listening to the house groan under the assault. Then another sound cut through the storm. A car engine. Headlights swept across the ceiling of the bedroom. Marcus got up quickly, moving to the window. A sedan was pulling up the drive, moving too fast for the conditions. It skidded to a stop near his truck. The driver's door opened. Claire climbed out, hunching against the rain. Behind her, the passenger door opened. A child emerged, small, maybe 10 years old. Emma, Marcus realized, his granddaughter. He met them at the front door. Claire looked angry, wet hair plastered to her face. Emma has been begging to see great-great-grandpa's mansion. I told her no, but she wouldn't stop crying. So here we are, we're staying 1 hour, then leaving. Emma bounded up the steps, eyes bright despite the storm. Grandpa Marcus, this place is like a haunted castle. Can I explore? Marcus was too surprised to respond immediately. He'd expected Claire to stay angry, to keep her distance, but here she was, standing in the entry hall, dripping rainwater onto the warped floorboards. Of course you can explore. Just be careful. Some of the floors are weak. Emma disappeared up the staircase before Marcus could say more. He turned to Claire, who was wringing out her jacket. Thank you for bringing her. Don't thank me. She wouldn't give me any peace. Claire's voice was sharp, defensive. I don't want to be part of whatever delusion you're chasing here, Dad. Emma just wanted to see it once. They stood in awkward silence, the storm raging outside. Marcus wanted to show her the letters, the ledger, to make her understand. But Claire's arms were crossed. Her expression closed off. 15 minutes passed, then Emma's voice echoed down from upstairs. Grandpa, I found something. They both climbed to the second floor. Emma was in the master bedroom, lying on her stomach, half under the bed frame. She wriggled backward, clutching something in her hands. It was hidden really good. She held up a small metal tin, the kind that might have once held tea or cookies. Rust ate at the edges, but it was still sealed. You crawled under there? Claire's voice held both alarm and reluctant admiration. I'm small. I fit where grown-ups can't. Emma beamed, proud of her discovery. Marcus took the tin carefully. The lid was stuck with age. He worked it gently until it popped open. Inside was a single folded newspaper, yellowed and brittle. He unfolded it carefully. The date was November 1941, a local paper. One article was circled in faded ink. Local man under federal investigation for harboring subversives. Marcus's hands began to shake. Claire leaned in despite herself, reading over his shoulder. The article was vague, careful. It mentioned Samuel Webb by name, described the estate, noted that federal authorities were investigating reports of suspicious activities, underground shelter for controversial figures, possible threat to national security. What does that mean? Emma's voice was small, sensing the weight in the room. It means Samuel was investigated by the FBI. Marcus barely recognized his own voice, and someone made sure to save this article. Outside, thunder rumbled. The storm was intensifying. Claire stared at the newspaper, her expression shifting from anger to confusion. Dad, I don't understand. What was great-great-grandpa doing that was so important Uncle Victor wants it buried? Marcus looked at his daughter, at his granddaughter. At this moment, that felt like a door opening. Come with me, I'll show you. He led them to the study, turned on his flashlight, and showed them the hidden compartment, pulled out the bundles of letters, spread them across the desk. Claire read in silence, picking up one letter after another. Emma stood beside her, sounding out words she didn't know. He helped people. Claire's voice had lost its edge. All these people, for more than a decade. Marcus showed her the ledger, the registry of names, the careful notes, the proof that Samuel's work had been systematic, organized, sustained. Some of these people became famous. Marcus pulled up the websites on his phone. Harold Finch, Victor Laurent, Dorothy Ashworth. They survived because of your great-grandfather. They created art, raised families, contributed to the world. Emma picked up a letter written in a child's handwriting. Dear Mr. Webb, thank you for the toys. Mama says you are an angel. I will remember you forever. Her eyes filled with tears. He helped kids like me. Yes. Claire sat down heavily in the desk chair. I'm sorry I was angry about the inheritance, Dad. I didn't know. None of us knew. Your grandfather, my father, he kept us away from Samuel. I never understood why. Marcus gestured at the documents. Maybe this is why. Maybe he was ashamed or afraid of what people would think. The storm continued to pound the house. Rain found gaps in the roof, dripping into rooms they had already searched. The wind made the old structure groan and sway. We should leave. Claire stood. This storm is getting worse, and Emma has school tomorrow. Can I come back, Grandpa? Emma hugged him around the waist. I want to help you solve the mystery. I'd like that. After they left, Marcus stood in the study listening to the storm. Emma had done what he couldn't, gotten Claire to actually engage with the estate, even briefly. His granddaughter, with her curiosity and lack of preconceptions, had found a clue he would have missed. The metal tin sat on the desk. Marcus looked at it again, at the newspaper article. FBI investigation. His grandfather had faced real danger, real consequences, and someone had saved evidence of it. He needed to keep searching. There was more to find. The next morning the storm had passed. Marcus walked the grounds, assessing damage. Several tree branches down. Part of the roof over the east wing had given way completely. Water damage throughout the second floor. But the foundation held. The structure was solid. Hank arrived mid-morning with tools and materials in the bed of his truck. He surveyed the damage with a practiced eye. Could be worse. We'll patch the roof first, then deal with interior water damage. They worked through the afternoon, Marcus following Hank's instructions. The physical labor felt good after days of reading and thinking. His muscles remembered this work from years on construction sites. As they carried supplies up to the second floor, Hank paused at the study door. Found something else, did you? Marcus showed him the newspaper article. Hank read it slowly, then looked up. FBI. Your grandfather was operating in dangerous times. I'm starting to understand that. You know Victor is going to come after you for this. Once he realizes you're serious about staying, about uncovering history, let him come. But Marcus's bravado faded when he saw the car pulling up the drive that evening. Victor's Mercedes. His uncle climbed out, followed by Derek. Victor strode toward the house, his face set in angry lines. Marcus met him on the front porch. You're still here. It's my property. We need to talk about that. Victor pulled papers from his jacket. You're making a mistake, Marcus. This house should be divided among the family. Sign these papers. We'll each take a third, sell it, be done with this mess. No. Victor's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're dealing with. Our father, your father, they had reasons for closing this place. Good reasons. What reasons? None of your business. Victor stepped closer, using his height to intimidate. Sign the papers. No. Derek moved to block the doorway, arms crossed. Marcus felt his pulse spike. This was more than a disagreement about property. This was threat. You'll regret this. Victor's voice dropped. You think you're alone now? Wait until you see what fighting us really means. They left. Marcus stood on the porch, hands shaking with adrenaline. Hank emerged from inside where he'd been listening. That went well. Marcus managed a weak laugh. They're hiding something. That's why they want me gone. Then we better find out what it is before they escalate. The basement had been calling to Marcus since the first day, but he'd put off exploring it. Basements in abandoned houses were never pleasant, but if his grandfather had hidden things on the upper floors, there might be more below. The basement stairs were stone, worn smooth in the centers by generations of feet. Marcus descended carefully, his flashlight beam cutting through darkness. The air was damp and cold. Water had seeped through the foundation in places, leaving dark stains on the walls. The basement was large, divided into several rooms. An old coal room still with remnants of black dust coating everything. A laundry area with ancient wash tubs. Storage rooms with empty shelves. Marcus walked slowly through the space, his footsteps echoing. Nothing seemed remarkable at first, just the ordinary remnants of an old house. Then, in the farthest storage room, he noticed something odd. When he walked across a particular section of floor, it sounded hollow beneath his feet, different from the rest of the concrete. He knelt and ran his hands over the surface. There, barely visible in the beam of his flashlight, a seam in the concrete, a section maybe 3 feet square that had been cut out and replaced. His heart racing, Marcus went back to his truck for tools. It took him 20 minutes of prying with a crowbar, but eventually the concrete section lifted up. It wasn't solid concrete at all, just a thin shell disguising what lay beneath. Inside was a metal box, military surplus, waterproof, designed to protect documents. Marcus lifted it out carefully. The box was heavy, packed full. The lid was sealed with wax that had hardened over the decades. He carried it upstairs to the study, placed it on the desk under his work light, and carefully broke the seal. Inside were documents wrapped in oilcloth. Marcus unwrapped them with shaking hands. The first thing he saw was a list of names, dozens of them, but these were different from the ledger entries. These names were marked with dates from 1939 to 1941. Beside each name were notations written in Samuel's careful hand. Arrived from Hamburg, fled Berlin, family of 4 from Vienna. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. These weren't just people seeking shelter from poverty. These were refugees fleeing Nazi persecution. Beneath the list were letters, some in English, some in German, some in languages Marcus couldn't identify, all expressing desperate gratitude for help with escape, with passage, with survival. His grandfather hadn't just sheltered people during the Depression. He'd helped rescue them from the Holocaust. Then Marcus found the telegram, dated November 1941, just before Pearl Harbor. Stop immediately. Stop government inquiries. Stop association with refugees considered suspicious. Stop risk. Risk to your safety. Stop. Close operation. Stop. A handwritten note was attached to the telegram in Samuel's distinctive script. I will complete arrangements for those currently here, but I must close the house. The risk has grown too great. Not for myself, but for those I help. If I am arrested, it would bring attention that would endanger the entire network. I will seal the records and hope that someday, when the world has changed, someone will understand what we tried to do. Marcus sat back in the chair, overwhelmed. His grandfather had been under FBI investigation, had faced real danger, and had closed his sanctuary not out of fear for himself, but to protect the people he was helping. That's why the family buried this history. In the 1940s and 50s, during the Red Scare and the early Cold War, having a history of harboring controversial figures and refugees could destroy a family's reputation. Or worse, his father would have been in his 20s or 30s then, old enough to understand the potential danger, old enough to decide the safest course was to close the house, never speak of it, and hope the past stayed buried. Marcus photographed every document, uploaded them to cloud storage. Whatever happened next, this evidence wouldn't be lost. Then he called Claire. This time she answered. "Dad?" Her voice was cautious. "Claire, you need to hear this." He told her about the basement discovery, the refugee list, the Holocaust rescues, the FBI investigation, Samuel's note about closing the operation to protect others. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "He was a hero, yes, and the family buried it because they were afraid." "Yes, I'm sorry, Dad. I was wrong to be angry. Can I come back this weekend? With Emma? I want to help you figure this out. Please." After they hung up, Marcus sat in the darkening study. Outside, another storm was building. He could feel it in the air, see it in the way clouds gathered on the horizon. But for the first time since the divorce, since the long years of isolation, Marcus didn't feel alone. His daughter was coming back. His granddaughter believed in this mystery. Hank was teaching him how to save the house. And somewhere in these rooms, Samuel's legacy waited to be fully uncovered. Marcus looked up at the space where Samuel's portrait should hang. Tomorrow he'd search for it. Tomorrow he'd keep digging. Whatever secrets remained, he would find them. Whatever fight his family wanted, he would meet it. Because Samuel had chosen him for this. And Marcus would not let him down. Saturday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of false spring that comes in late October before winter asserts itself. Marcus stood in the study organizing documents when he heard tires on gravel. Through the window he watched Claire's sedan pull up, Emma already bouncing in the passenger seat before the car fully stopped. They'd spoken twice more since the storm night. Brief conversations, careful, but something had shifted. Claire was no longer angry, just uncertain, trying to reconcile the family histories she'd believed with the evidence Marcus kept uncovering. Emma burst through the front door carrying a notebook and colored pencils. "I'm the chief clue finder. I brought supplies." Marcus couldn't help smiling. She had her mother's determination, but without the years of accumulated hurt and distance that made Claire so guarded. Claire followed more slowly, holding 2 travel mugs. Brought coffee. Figured you don't have electricity for a maker. "Thank you." They stood in the entry hall, awkward. Then Claire looked up at the peeling ceiling, the damaged wallpaper. "This place must have been beautiful once. It will be again." "That's ambitious, Dad. Do you even know what restoration like this costs?" Marcus had been avoiding that calculation. "No, but I'm meeting with a lawyer Monday, a state attorney. Need to understand what I'm actually dealing with legally." Claire nodded. Emma had already disappeared upstairs, her footsteps echoing through empty rooms. "She's going to find every hidden compartment in this house." Claire's voice held reluctant affection. "Last night she drew a treasure map of the estate based on what she remembers, color-coded by danger level. Danger level, red for rooms with weak floors, yellow for places with broken glass, green for safe exploration zones. She takes this very seriously." They worked through the morning, Marcus showing Claire the full extent of the ledger entries, while Emma explored with single-minded focus. Around noon, Emma's voice rang out from somewhere on the second floor. "Grandpa! Mom, I found another clue." They climbed to the library, a room Marcus had only glanced into before. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, most volumes too damaged by moisture to salvage. Emma stood on a chair, reaching into a high shelf. There's a gap behind the books. She pulled out a slim volume children's book from the look of the faded cover. This was hidden way in back. The book was fairy tales, German language, pages yellowed but intact. Emma opened to the front page where an inscription was written in careful child's hand. To Samuel from the Levin children, thank you for keeping us safe, 1939. Pressed between the pages, preserved for over 80 years, was a single flower. Dried, delicate, still holding a ghost of purple color. Emma's eyes went wide. They were kids, like me, and he saved them. Marcus felt something break open in his chest. Yes. Claire took the book carefully, reading the inscription again. The Levin family. Do they show up in the ledger? Marcus went to retrieve it, flipping through pages. Found the entry, the Levin family. Arrived October 1938 from Hamburg via New York. Father was university professor, dismissed and threatened. Family stayed 4 months while arrangements made for passage to California. 2 daughters, ages 8 and 11. Father eventually secured teaching position in Los Angeles. Departed February 1939. Emma touched the pressed flower with one finger. So gentle. This was their thank you. Claire looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and something in her expression softened completely. I'm sorry I shut you out. I didn't understand what you were trying to protect. I didn't understand it myself until a few days ago. They spent the afternoon cataloging what Emma found. More books with inscriptions, sheet music with dedications, even a child's drawing tucked into a desk drawer showing the mansion with stick figures playing in the garden. By evening, when Claire said they needed to leave, Emma was already planning her return. Next weekend, I'll search the attic. That's where people hide the really good stuff. After they left, Marcus sat in the study with the Levin children's book open before him. 2 girls, not much younger than Emma, had lived in this house, had played in these rooms, had pressed a flower and written a thank you that survived decades of abandonment. His phone rang, unknown number. Marcus answered cautiously. Mr. Webb, this is Linda Petrova. I'm an estate attorney. Mrs. Hardwick at the Historical Society gave me your number. She mentioned you might need legal counsel regarding the property on Hollowbrook Road. Yes, I do. Can you meet Monday morning? My office. We should discuss your situation before things get more complicated. Things are already complicated. Her voice held dry humor. Then we'd better get started. Monday morning, Marcus drove into town, following GPS to a small law office above a bakery. Linda Petrova met him in a cramped conference room, mid-40s, sharp eyes behind frameless glasses. She listened while Marcus explained the will reading, Victor's anger, the discoveries in the house, the family's hostility. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, asking occasional clarifying questions. When he finished, she set down her pen. Your situation has several complications. First, the property abandonment. 20+ years uninhabited creates legal vulnerabilities. Second, Victor's likely claim that Samuel lacked testamentary capacity, mental competence to make a will. Third, and this is the part that concerns me most, your uncle has resources to wage a lengthy legal battle. You do not. How lengthy? Depends on how determined he is. Could be months, could be years. I can't afford years. Linda leaned back in her chair. Then we need to build an airtight case quickly. 3 things we must prove. The will represents Samuel's true intent. He was mentally competent when he wrote it, and you have legitimate claim versus other heirs. Do you have evidence of any of this? Marcus pulled out his phone, showed her photos of the letters, the ledger, Samuel's note from the basement. Linda studied them carefully, scrolling through image after image. This is remarkable. Your grandfather documented everything. She looked up. This proves mental acuity, detailed organization, careful record keeping. It also suggests why he chose you specifically. She tapped the screen where Samuel's final note was displayed. He wanted someone who would care enough to uncover this history, not someone who'd sell the property for profit. Victor is claiming I manipulated Samuel somehow, that I convinced him to change the will. Did you visit your grandfather before his death? No, I hadn't seen him in years. That actually helps your case. Hard to manipulate someone you never saw. She made more notes. But Victor will argue abandonment of property, diminished capacity, unfair distribution. We need witnesses, people who can testify about Samuel's work, his mental state in his final years, the historical significance of what he did. There's a historian at the state university, Dr. Whitmore. He's interested in the documents. Get him involved. We'll need expert testimony. She quoted her fee, 15,000 retainer, 250 per hour after that. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Can you pay that? I have savings. Some. How much? About 60,000 total. Linda's expression was carefully neutral. That might cover initial legal costs, but restoration of a property this size, you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars, possibly more. I'm aware. Are you? Because Victor will use your financial limitations against you. He'll argue you can't maintain the property, that it should go to someone with resources to properly care for it. Then I'll find a way. Linda studied him for a long moment. Why? Why fight this hard for a house you didn't even know existed until a month ago? Marcus thought about Emma's face when she found the children's book, about Claire finally looking at him without resentment, about Samuel's letter explaining why he'd chosen Marcus, the only one who might care enough. Because someone should. Because my grandfather did something important, and the family erased it out of shame. Because those people he helped, they mattered. Their stories matter. Linda nodded slowly. All right, I'll take your case. But Marcus, you need to understand, this is going to get ugly. Your family will say things. They'll dig into your life, your divorce, your relationship with your kids. They'll make you look like an opportunist, a manipulator. Are you prepared for that? Yes, she didn't look convinced, but she opened a folder and began outlining legal strategy. They needed nursing home records proving Samuel's mental clarity, witnesses who saw him in his final years, historical documentation of the property's significance, challenge Victor's standing as alternative heir, and we have 10 days. Linda closed her folder. Victor will likely file a petition to contest the will. Standard procedure. We need to be ready. That afternoon, Dr. Whitmore arrived at the estate with 2 graduate students, all carrying equipment cases. He was younger than Marcus expected, early 50s, graying hair, intensity behind wire-rimmed glasses. He walked through the mansion with reverence, barely speaking. In the study, when Marcus showed him the hidden compartment, the letters, the ledger, Whitmore's hands shook slightly as he examined them. This is extraordinary. He turned pages carefully, reading entries. Private Rescue Network documentation. We have so little of this. Most people destroyed records out of fear. Your grandfather preserved what others erased. The graduate students photographed everything with professional cameras, taking detailed notes. Whitmore read several letters, his expression growing more absorbed. Mr. Webb, do you understand what you have here? This isn't just local history. This documents a piece of the broader resistance effort. Private citizens creating networks to help refugees. We've known such networks existed, but documentation has been sparse. Marcus showed him the basement discovery, the Holocaust rescue operation, the FBI investigation, Samuel's final note. Whitmore read everything twice. Your grandfather was under federal investigation. He closed the operation to protect the people he was helping. He looked up. That's extraordinary courage. Can you help prove this in court? My uncle is contesting the will. Claims I manipulated Samuel, that the property should be divided among family. I can testify as expert witness about authenticity and historical significance. This work was important. It deserves recognition, not erasure. He gestured at the documents. We can also propose partnership. If you retain the property, the university can help establish it as historical site. Preservation, research, public access. I'd want that. That's what Samuel intended. Then we'll support your legal case. But Whitmore's expression grew serious. Once this becomes public, you'll face pushback. Families who've kept secrets don't like exposure. Victor will likely escalate. Are you ready for that? Everyone kept asking Marcus if he was ready, as if he could ever be fully prepared for his own family to turn against him completely. I'm ready. The weekend arrived, and with it, Claire and Emma. This time, Claire brought overnight bags. Emma had convinced her they needed full days to properly search the house. Emma appointed herself lead investigator, dividing the mansion into zones and assigning tasks. She took the attic, too cramped for adults to navigate easily. perfect for a determined 10-year-old. Marcus and Hank worked on structural repairs while Claire photographed and cataloged documents. By midday Saturday, they developed a rhythm, almost like family, Marcus thought, the kind of working together toward common purpose that he'd never managed when Claire was young. Emma called down from the attic shortly after lunch. Found trunks! Lots of them. They climbed up to find her surrounded by open containers, paintings inside, dozens of them wrapped in protective cloth. Emma had carefully arranged them on the dusty floor. These are beautiful. She pointed to a landscape, simple but evocative. Someone painted this here? Marcus checked the signature. H.F. Harold Finch. First entry in the legend. He was a painter. Stayed here in 1931. These must be the landscapes he completed. There were more portraits, still lifes, abstract pieces that spoke to different hands, different styles. Each signed with initials that corresponded to names in Samuel's records. Emma found sheet music in another trunk, handwritten scores with notes and margins, a manuscript typed on yellowed paper, corrections inked between lines. Physical evidence of the creative work done in this house during those desperate years. Then, in the last trunk, wrapped in faded fabric, paintings of the mansion itself, but not abandoned. These showed the house alive, people on the porch talking and laughing, the dining room table crowded with guests, gardens in full bloom, children playing among flowers. Emma studied one painting, a girl about her age sitting under a tree, reading. Is that one of the Levin daughters? Maybe. Marcus felt the weight of it. These people had lived here, created here, found safety here, and then vanished from family memory as if they'd never existed. Claire had been silent, going through other boxes. She made a sound, not quite a gasp, more like recognition of something dreaded. Dad, you need to see this. She held a stack of letters tied with string. The paper quality was different. Official letterhead, formal typing. Claire had already opened several. These are correspondence between your father and Uncle Charles, my grandfather and his brother, dated 1940 to 1942. Marcus took them carefully. The first letter was dated April 1941, from James Webb to Charles Webb. Father is bringing more of those refugees. It's becoming dangerous. People are asking questions. We need to make him stop before he ruins us all. The next one, June 1941, Charles responding, agreed. If he won't listen to reason, we must take other action. I've been considering informing authorities. It's for his own protection. Marcus's hand started shaking. October 1941, James to Charles. I've made the call. FBI will investigate. Father will be furious, but it's necessary. We're doing the right thing for the family. Emma had climbed down from the attic and stood watching. Even at 10, she could sense the shift in the room's atmosphere. What is it? Claire's voice was tight. Your great-great-grandfather James, Marcus's father, he reported Samuel to the FBI. He and his brother. They called federal authorities on their own father. Why would he do that? Because he was afraid. Claire looked at Marcus, afraid of what people would think, afraid it would hurt the family's reputation. So he destroyed what Samuel was building. Marcus read through the remaining letters, detailed coordination between James and Charles. Information passed to FBI agents. Satisfaction when the investigation resulted in Samuel closing the operation in December 1942. The final letter was from James, dated January 1943. Father has closed the house. Operation successful. Family reputation secure. We did what was necessary. Emma's face crumpled. That's mean. That's really, really mean. Marcus folded the letters carefully, placed them back in their stack. This was worse than abandonment. This was active betrayal. His father and uncle hadn't just been ashamed. They'd been vindictive. They'd used government power to shut down a humanitarian operation during the Holocaust because they valued social standing over human lives. Claire sat down hard on an old trunk. I'm going to be sick. Hank, who'd come up to see what the commotion was about, took the letters from Marcus. Read them silently. His weathered face grew harder with each page. Your family didn't just bury history. They helped destroy it while it was happening. The weight of it settled over the attic. Emma moved to Marcus's side, taking his hand. We'll tell everyone what they did. We'll make sure people know. Yes, Marcus looked at Claire. I'm using these in court. All of it, the full story. Claire nodded, jaw set. Good. They deserve exposure. That evening, after Emma fell asleep on the study couch wrapped in Marcus's jacket, Claire and her father sat together at the desk. The letters were spread before them, chronological proof of a family's moral failure. I always thought Grandpa James was a good man. Claire's voice was barely above a whisper. Mom talked about him like he was some kind of saint. Patient, principled, devoted to family. Maybe he was those things in other ways, but not in this. Does it make us bad that we're descended from someone who did this? No, Marcus reached across and took her hand. It makes us responsible for telling the truth, for not repeating their mistakes. Claire looked at their joined hands. When you and Mom divorced, I blamed you. Thought you didn't fight hard enough? Didn't care enough? I wasn't there enough when you were growing up. Too focused on work, on providing instead of connecting. I'm doing the same thing with Emma, working too much, avoiding difficult conversations. She pulled her hand back, wiping her eyes. Watching you fight for this, for something that matters more than money or comfort, it's made me question what I've been prioritizing. You're a good mother, Claire. Emma knows she's loved. She needs more than love. She needs to see that principles matter, that some things are worth fighting for even when the cost is high. Claire gestured at the house. You're teaching her that. Better late than never. They sat in silence while rain began to patter against windows. Another storm moving through, gentler than the last one but steady. I have a meeting tomorrow. Marcus hadn't planned to mention it yet, but Claire deserved to know. Linda set it up. We're tracking down survivors if we can. People Samuel helped. Their testimony would strengthen the legal case. Where? 6-hour drive. Woman named Ruth Adler. She was 7 when her family stayed here in 1938. Fled Vienna. Can I come? I have vacation days. Emma's father can take her for a few days. Marcus looked at his daughter. Really? Really? This matters, Dad. And maybe we need the time to talk, to figure out how to be family again. Monday morning, they loaded into Marcus's truck for the drive. Emma had returned to her father's house reluctantly, extracting a promise that Claire would bring her back the following weekend. The highway stretched north through farmland and forest. Claire brought coffee and a thermos, sandwiches for lunch. Small gestures that felt significant. For the first hour, they drove in comfortable silence. Then Claire started asking questions about the documents, about what Marcus had learned. He explained the ledger system, the different types of people Samuel had helped, the care he'd taken to record everything. He wanted it remembered. Marcus kept his eyes on the road. Even if he had to hide it, he wanted someone eventually to know. You barely knew him. Claire's tone was curious rather than accusatory. Why do you think he chose you specifically? Marcus had thought about this often over the past weeks. Maybe because I was the most isolated, divorced, estranged from my kids. He saw something of himself in that. Or maybe he saw something you hadn't seen yet. What do you mean? Claire shifted in her seat. You spent my entire memory being passive, Dad. Going along, not making waves. Even in the divorce, you just accepted it. Signed papers, moved out, didn't fight. There wasn't anything to fight for by then. Your mother and I were strangers living in the same house. But you never fought for me either. Or, Owen, when we drifted away, you just let us go. Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I didn't know how to reach you. Every time I tried, you seemed annoyed. Because I was angry. Angry that you weren't angry. That you just accepted everything falling apart. The highway curved through hills, turning brown with approaching winter. Marcus had known this conversation would come eventually. Hadn't expected it in a truck on the way to interview a Holocaust survivor. I'm sorry, Claire, for not fighting harder, for letting work be my excuse to avoid difficult emotions. She was quiet for several miles. Then her voice softer. I'm sorry, too, for punishing you, for keeping Emma away. You're good with her, Dad, better than you were with me. I was young when you were little, didn't know what I was doing, too focused on climbing the career ladder, on being successful. You're doing something harder now, fighting for something that it won't make you money. That's costing you money, that might bankrupt you. She looked at him. That takes courage. Or stupidity. Claire smiled slightly. Maybe both, but it matters. Emma sees it. I see it. They stopped for lunch at a rest area, eating sandwiches at a picnic table while semi-trucks rumbled past. Claire asked about Victor, about what Marcus thought would happen in court. He'll fight hard. He's got resources, good lawyers. Linda says it could get ugly. Are you scared? Terrified, but not enough to stop. The admission felt significant. Marcus had spent years pretending fear didn't exist, burying it under work and routine. Acknowledging it out loud was strangely liberating. Ruth Adler lived in a residential neighborhood, modest houses with neat lawns. Her daughter answered the door, middle-aged woman with kind eyes who introduced herself as Sarah. Mom's expecting you. She's been excited all week. She doesn't get many visitors these days. Ruth sat in a chair by the window, sunlight illuminating white hair and wrinkled hands folded in her lap. At 91, she was frail but alert, eyes bright with intelligence. Mr. Webb, her voice was stronger than Marcus expected. I've been waiting a long time to talk about Samuel. Claire introduced herself. Ruth studied her carefully, then smiled. You have your great-great-grandfather's eyes. Kind eyes. They sat, and Ruth began to talk. Her memory was sharp, details preserved across decades. She described arriving at the mansion in October 1938, her family exhausted, frightened, unsure what would happen to them. The house was beautiful then, full of life. There were other families staying, other children. Samuel gave us rooms on the second floor. My sister and I shared a room with yellow wallpaper. I can still see that wallpaper, yellow with tiny white flowers. Emma would love that detail, Claire observed. Who's Emma? My daughter, she's 10. She's been helping Marcus search the house, finding clues. Ruth's expression softened. The same age I was. Tell her that Samuel saved children like her. Not because he had to, but because he couldn't not help. That's real courage, not being able to walk away from suffering. Ruth described the months they lived there, how Samuel bought them winter coats when November came, how he paid for her father to travel to job interviews, never asking for repayment, how on Christmas, despite the family being Jewish, Samuel gave the children small gifts. We had nothing, but those gifts, a doll for me, a wooden car for my sister, they meant we mattered, that someone cared we existed. Her father eventually secured a teaching position at a college in Ohio. They left in February 1939. Ruth's mother cried when they said goodbye. Samuel gave my father an envelope with money for the train tickets and first month's rent. Said it was a loan, but we all knew it was a gift. My father tried to pay him back years later, sent letters to this address. They came back undeliverable. The house was already closed. Marcus showed her photographs from his phone, the letters, the ledger entry about her family, the children's book with the pressed flower. Ruth's hands trembled as she looked at the screen. Is that really our entry, our names? Yes, your father was listed as university professor. 2 daughters, ages 7 and 9. That's right. My sister Sarah was 2 years older. She became a doctor, died 5 years ago. Ruth's voice caught. She always said Samuel taught her to help people, that seeing him give so much made her want to do the same. Can you testify? Marcus leaned forward. In court? My uncle is trying to take the property. Says the will was invalid. If people heard your story, I'll testify. Ruth's response was immediate. I've waited 86 years to properly thank Samuel. If standing up in court honors his memory, I'll do it gladly. Claire pulled out her phone. Would you mind if I record this, just for our records? Ruth agreed, and they spent another hour capturing her testimony. She talked about the other families who stayed there, the artists who worked in the studios Samuel set up, the sense of community among people who'd lost everything else. He never made us feel like charity cases. That was important. We had chores, responsibilities. We contributed what we could. He treated us like temporary family, not refugees to be pitied. As they prepared to leave, Ruth took Marcus's hand in both of hers. Your grandfather was one of the most important people in my life. Not because he gave us material things, though those helped, but because he gave us dignity when the world was trying to strip it away. Don't let anyone erase that, Marcus promised he wouldn't. Sarah walked them to the door, then pulled him aside while Claire went ahead to the truck. Mom has been looking for information about Samuel for years. She tried to find him to thank him. When she saw your article request online, she cried. This matters to her more than you know. It matters to me, too. On the drive back, Claire was quiet for the first hour. Then she said abruptly, "I'm proud of you." Marcus glanced at her, surprised. For doing this, for fighting, for showing Emma what real integrity looks like. She stared out the window. "I spent years disappointed in you. Turns out I was looking at the wrong things. I'm still the same person who let you drift away." "No, you're not. You're fighting now. Maybe you needed something big enough to fight for." The highway stretched ahead, sun setting in the rearview mirror. Marcus thought about Ruth's words. Samuel couldn't not help. Maybe that was the real measure of character. Not the absence of fear, but the inability to walk away despite it. They arrived back at the estate after dark. Hank's truck was parked in the drive, lights on inside the house. He met them at the door, expression grim. "We have a problem. What happened?" "Victor called an emergency town meeting. Tomorrow night. He's claiming the property is a public hazard, that it should be condemned or forced into sale for development. Can he do that?" Hank shrugged. "Town council has authority over health and safety issues. If he convinces them the house is dangerous, they could force your hand, make you sell or face condemnation. So it's not just a legal fight anymore." Claire crossed her arms. "He's going political." "Smart move," Hank admitted. "Public pressure could force Marcus out even if the will holds up in court." Marcus looked at the mansion, at the work they had already done. The patched roof, the cleaned windows, the stabilized foundation. "Then we go to the meeting, show them what we're really doing here." That night, alone in the study, Marcus called Linda, explained about the town meeting. "Victor's escalating." She sounded unsettled. "He knows the legal case is shaky, so he's trying alternative approaches. You need to be at that meeting with documentation. Show the town council this isn't about preserving an eyesore, it's about historical significance. What if they side with Victor? Then we'll fight that battle too." Her voice hardened. "But Marcus, you should know, this is what I meant about it getting ugly. He's not going to stop until he wins or you give up. Are you sure you want to keep going?" "I'm sure. Then I'll see you at the meeting." The next evening, the town hall was packed. Marcus arrived with Claire, Hank, and Dr. Whitmore. Linda was already there, sitting near the front. The town council, 5 members, all over 60, sat at a raised table looking uncomfortable with the crowd. Victor stood near the front with Derek and Nina, all 3 dressed in business attire. Professional, respectable. Marcus in his work clothes suddenly felt underprepared. The mayor called the meeting to order. Victor spoke first, presenting his case with polish and confidence. The property at 1247 Hollowbrook Road has been abandoned for over 2 decades. It's a safety hazard, windows broken, roof collapsing, foundation compromised. Children could get hurt exploring it. Wildlife has taken up residence. The entire structure should be condemned or sold for development that would actually benefit the community. Murmurs of agreement from some attendees. Victor continued, describing Marcus as well-meaning but misguided, someone with no resources or expertise to properly restore the property. "My nephew means well, but he's chasing sentiment instead of practical reality. This house has been a blight on our community for years. It's time to move forward." The mayor looked at Marcus. "Mr. Webb, would you like to respond?" Marcus stood, pulse hammering. Public speaking had never been his strength. But he thought about Ruth's testimony, about Emma's insistence that Samuel was a hero, about the children's book with its pressed flower. The house at 1247 Hollowbrook Road isn't just an abandoned property. It's the site of one of the most important humanitarian operations this region has ever seen. My grandfather, Samuel Webb, sheltered over 100 people there between 1931 and 1942. Artists, families, refugees fleeing persecution. He asked for nothing in return. He showed photographs on his phone, passing it to the council members. Letters of gratitude, the ledger, entries from families saved during the Depression and the Holocaust. Dr. Whitmore stood. "I'm a historian at the State University. I've authenticated these documents." Samuel Webb's work was part of a larger network that saved lives during one of history's darkest periods. This property has significant historical value that goes far beyond local interest. Victor scoffed. "Interesting story. But it doesn't change the current reality. The house is falling apart. Marcus has no means to restore it. Sentiment doesn't pay for roof repairs." Hank rose from his seat. I'm assisting with restoration. The structure is solid. We've already completed foundation work, roof repairs, window replacement. The house can be saved. With what money? Victor's voice grew sharp. Marcus is a construction supervisor. Divorced, limited savings. He can't afford this project. In 6 months, when he runs out of resources, the house will still be abandoned. Better to sell it now to someone with means. The room erupted in competing voices. Marcus felt the energy shifting, people unsure who to believe. Then Claire stood. I'm Marcus's daughter. I didn't support this project initially. I thought my father was chasing ghosts, wasting time and money. But I've learned something these past weeks. Some things matter more than profit. My great-great-grandfather saved lives. My father is honoring that legacy. That's not sentiment. That's integrity. The mayor held up a hand for quiet. This is clearly a complex situation. We'll need to table formal decision until more information is gathered. But I'm not prepared to condemn the property tonight based solely on age and disrepair. Not if there's genuine historical significance and active restoration underway. Victor's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. Perhaps, but it's the council's decision to make. After the meeting, as people filed out, several approached Marcus, an elderly woman who remembered hearing stories about the Webb House helping people during hard times, a history teacher interested in bringing students to tour once restoration was complete, a local contractor offering materials at cost. But Victor caught Marcus in the parking lot, Derek standing close behind in obvious intimidation. You're making enemies, Marcus, people who matter in this community. My lawyer is filing papers tomorrow, petition to contest the will on grounds of diminished capacity and undue influence. You'll be in court within 2 weeks. Fine, I'll be there. Victor stepped closer. You really think you can win this against me with your pathetic savings and borrowed labor? I don't need to beat you, Victor. I just need to tell the truth. Truth. Victor's laugh was harsh. You want truth? Your father hated Samuel, thought he was reckless, dangerous. That's why he kept you away. That's why this house was closed. Because our fathers knew associating with Samuel's politics would destroy us. My father reported him to the FBI. Claire's voice cut through the darkness. She stepped out from behind Marcus, holding her phone. We found letters, detailed correspondence between James and Charles Webb, describing how they called federal authorities on their own father, how they sabotaged his rescue operation during the Holocaust because they valued reputation over human lives. Victor went pale. That's a lie. It's documented. We have the letters. We have proof. She faced her great-uncle without flinching. You're not protecting family legacy, Uncle Victor. You're protecting family shame, and I won't help you do it anymore. Victor looked between them, then at Derek. Get in the car. They left. Marcus and Claire stood in the parking lot while others departed, the night growing quiet around them. That was brave. Claire shook her head. That was necessary. There's a difference from Driving back to the estate, Claire said she needed to tell Marcus something. Victor had called her the previous week, offered her $50,000 to stop supporting Marcus, to convince Emma they should stay out of family business. Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. What did you say? I told him to go to hell. She looked out the window. He tried to buy my silence, Dad. Like I could be paid off to betray you. I'm sorry you were put in that position. Don't be. It clarified things, showed me exactly who Victor is and what this fight is really about. Claire turned to face him. I'm with you in this, whatever it costs. Emma and I, we're family. We stand together. Marcus couldn't speak past the sudden tightness in his throat, just nodded. That night at the estate, they sat in the study, Marcus, Claire, Hank, Linda, who'd followed them back from the meeting. They reviewed strategy for the inevitable court battle. Victor will file tomorrow. Linda laid out papers on the desk. Petition to contest will. We'll have preliminary hearing within 10 days. Judge will assess basic merits before deciding whether to proceed to full trial. What are our chances? Linda didn't sugarcoat it. 50-50 at best. Victor has money, influence, good legal team. We have compelling historical evidence and strong witnesses, but property law often favors family distribution over individual inheritance, especially with abandonment issues. So we might lose despite being right. Welcome to the legal system. Hank spoke up. What about the house itself? If Marcus loses in court, what happens? Goes to a state auction. Victor would likely buy it, then sell for development. Everything Samuel built, everything documented here, all of it bulldozed for condos or strip malls. Over my dead body, Marcus muttered. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Linda gathered her papers. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we start building your defense in earnest. After Linda left, Hank headed out too. Claire stayed, sitting in the study while Marcus stood at the window looking out at darkness. You okay, Dad? Just thinking. About Samuel standing in this room 80 years ago, watching his life's work shut down because his own sons betrayed him. How alone he must have felt. But he wasn't alone, really. Claire came to stand beside him. All those people he helped, they remembered him. Ruth Adler spent decades looking for him. The Levin children left a book and a flower that lasted over 80 years. His legacy survived even when the family tried to erase it. I hope I'm worthy of this, of what he trusted me to do. Emma thinks you are. That's good enough for me. They stood together in companionable silence until Claire said she needed to get home. Pick Emma up from her ex-husband's place. I'll be back Friday with Emma. She's already planning her next search mission. Tell her to bring her clue-finding notebook. After Claire left, Marcus walked through the dark house one final time. So much discovered, so much still hidden. The court battle would begin soon. Victor would bring all his resources to bear. The risk of losing everything was real. But standing in Samuel's study, surrounded by evidence of courage that spanned decades, Marcus felt something close to peace. Some things were worth fighting for even when the odds were terrible. Some legacies demanded protection, regardless of personal cost. He thought about Ruth's words. Samuel couldn't not help. Maybe that was what Samuel had seen in Marcus. Not strength or capability, just the inability to walk away once he understood what was at stake. Tomorrow the real fight would begin. But tonight, in this house full of ghosts and memories, Marcus Webb was exactly where he needed to be. The courthouse stood downtown, gray stone that had weathered a century of disputes. Marcus arrived early that morning with Linda, both carrying boxes of evidence. The preliminary hearing would determine if Victor's petition had merit enough to proceed to full trial. Claire met them on the steps, Emma beside her wearing what was clearly her best dress. The girl carried her clue-finding notebook like a talisman. You didn't have to bring her. Marcus looked at his granddaughter with concern. This could get ugly. Emma wants to be here. Claire's tone allowed no argument. And honestly, the judge should see who this fight affects. Should see there's a child who cares about Samuel's legacy. Inside, the courtroom filled quickly. Victor and his legal team occupied one table. Bradford Pierce, expensive suit, leather briefcase, the kind of lawyer who won through attrition rather than justice. Derek and Nina sat in the front row behind them, expressions carefully neutral. Dr. Whitmore arrived with his graduate certificate. Hank limped in, leaning on his cane. Ruth Adler was wheeled in by her daughter Sarah, the elderly woman bundled against courthouse air conditioning despite the mild day outside. Judge Patricia Morrison entered, mid-60s, steel gray hair, reading glasses on a chain. She surveyed the packed courtroom with apparent surprise. This is a preliminary hearing for a state dispute, not a public spectacle. Nevertheless, please be seated. Bradford stood immediately, launching into his opening. The narrative was smooth, practiced. Samuel Webb, elderly and declining, had been isolated in a nursing home for 5 years. In his final weeks, suffering from confusion and loneliness, he'd been influenced by a grandson who'd shown no interest during his lifetime. The will was suspect, the inheritance unfair. Marcus lacked resources to maintain the property. Justice demanded equitable distribution among all heirs. Linda countered with precision. Samuel Webb had been of sound mind until his final week, as nursing home records would prove. The will was deliberate, explicable, valid. The property had historical significance that transcended family squabbles. Marcus was the only heir who cared about preserving Samuel's legacy rather than profiting from its destruction. Judge Morrison looked between them. I've reviewed the petition in response. This appears to involve substantial factual disputes. We'll hear testimony today to determine if full trial is warranted. Mr. Pierce, call your first witness. Bradford called Victor to the stand. Marcus's uncle took the oath, settled into the witness chair with practiced ease. He painted a picture of a confused old man, a neglected property, a nephew who appeared out of nowhere with dubious motives. I visited my grandfather every month for 5 years. Victor's voice carried genuine emotion. Whether real or manufactured, Marcus couldn't tell. He was lonely, sometimes didn't recognize me. Then suddenly, weeks before his death, he changes his will to leave everything to Marcus, who hadn't visited once. It's suspicious. Linda cross-examined with surgical precision. Did your grandfather ever discuss the property with you? He mentioned it occasionally. Did he explain why he'd closed it down? No, he didn't like talking about the past. Why not? Victor shifted. It was painful for him, I think. Or perhaps because you and your father didn't want him discussing it. Linda placed a document on the evidence table. This is correspondence from 1942 between your father, Charles Webb, and Marcus's father, James Webb. In it, they discuss reporting Samuel to federal authorities for his refugee assistance work. Were you aware of this? The courtroom stirred. Victor's composure cracked slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. Your father and James Webb jointly informed the FBI about Samuel's activities. They sabotaged his humanitarian work during the Holocaust. Linda's voice remained level, factual. Isn't it true that your opposition to Marcus isn't about protecting family interests, but protecting family shame? Bradford objected loudly. Speculation and inflammatory language. Judge Morrison sustained it, but the damage was done. The jury of public opinion in the courtroom had shifted. Linda called Dr. Whitmore next. He established his credentials, then testified about the historical significance of Samuel's operation. The documentation was extraordinary. Detailed records of 150-plus individuals sheltered over 11 years. The property represented important regional history that deserved preservation. This wasn't casual charity. Dr. Whitmore's academic authority filled the courtroom. Samuel Webb ran a sophisticated rescue network during periods when such work was dangerous. The FBI investigated him. He faced real consequences for his principles. That's historically significant beyond local interest. Bradford's cross-examination tried to undermine the relevance. Historical interest doesn't obligate one heir over others. Mr. Webb could donate the papers to a museum and sell the property. Whitmore disagreed. The property itself is part of the history, where people were sheltered, where art was created, where lives were saved. That context matters. Separating documents from location diminishes both. Ruth Adler testified next. Sarah helped her into the witness box, adjusting the microphone to her height. Ruth's voice was thin but steady as she described arriving at the mansion in 1938. 7 years old, terrified, unsure what America would bring. Mr. Samuel gave us rooms with yellow wallpaper. My sister and I shared that room for 4 months. He bought us winter coats when November came. On Christmas, even though we were Jewish, he gave us small presents. A doll for me. She paused, composing herself. We had nothing, but those gifts meant we mattered, that someone cared we existed. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even Bradford seemed reluctant to cross-examine an elderly Holocaust survivor, but he tried. Mrs. Adler, you're 91 years old. How reliable are these memories from 86 years ago? Ruth's eyes sharpened. I remember every detail of those months, the creak of the third stair, the way Samuel hummed when he cooked, the smell of wood smoke from the library fireplace. When you're 7 years old and your entire world has collapsed, you remember the person who gives you back hope. I remember Samuel Webb better than I remember yesterday. Bradford had no response to that. Linda called Marcus. He took the stand feeling exposed, vulnerable. She walked him through the inheritance, the discoveries, why he was fighting so hard. I didn't know my grandfather. Marcus kept his voice steady. My father kept us apart. I had no idea why until I found the evidence. Samuel did something important, something brave, and my family erased it out of shame. He looked at Victor. Someone needed to tell the truth. It happened to be me. Bradford's cross-examination was brutal. He highlighted the divorce, the estrangement from children, the limited finances. Made Marcus sound like an opportunist desperate for assets. Mr. Webb, isn't it true you're recently divorced, financially strained, and this property represents significant potential income? I'm not selling it. You say that now, but when reality sets in, when you realize restoration costs hundreds of thousands of dollars you don't have, you'll change your tune. This is fantasy, not preservation. I'm establishing a foundation. The property will become a historical site. I won't profit from it. Bradford smirked. Noble words, but you don't have resources to maintain a 43-acre estate. This is a pipe dream that will fail within a year, leaving the property in worse condition than now. Then Emma stood up in the gallery. Can I say something? Judge Morrison looked surprised. Young lady, this is... Linda spoke quickly. Your Honor, Emma Webb is Marcus's granddaughter, direct descendant of Samuel Webb. She has standing as affected party. The judge considered, very briefly. Emma walked to the witness stand, needing the step stool to reach the microphone. At 10 years old, she looked tiny in the formal courtroom, but her voice carried clear conviction. My name is Emma. I'm 10. I never met great-great-grandpa Samuel, but I know he was good because of the clues. She opened her notebook, showing hand-drawn maps, careful notes, sketches of items found. I found a tin under his bed with a newspaper. I found letters from kids thanking him. I found a pressed flower from 1939 that children gave him because he saved their lives. The courtroom was transfixed. Bradford started to object, but Judge Morrison waved him silent. Grandpa Marcus says Samuel saved people when nobody else would. That makes him a hero. Heroes should be remembered, not erased. Emma's voice wavered but didn't break. Uncle Victor wants to pretend Samuel never helped anyone. But that's like if I did something really brave and my family pretended it never happened. That would hurt. She looked directly at Victor. Samuel can't defend himself anymore. So Grandpa Marcus is defending him. That's what family does. They defend each other. Please don't let Uncle Victor win. Because if he wins, all those people Samuel saved, it's like they don't matter anymore. Judge Morrison's eyes were bright. Thank you, Miss Emma. That was very powerful. Bradford tried to object. Your Honor, this is emotional manipulation. The judge cut him off coldly. Counsel, that child spoke from her heart about her family history. If it moved people, perhaps that says something about the substance of her testimony rather than its form. Linda had one final piece of evidence. Your Honor, I'd like to submit a letter written by Samuel Webb 2 weeks before his death. It was hidden in his portrait frame, addressed specifically to Marcus Webb. The judge took the letter, read it silently. Her expression shifted from judicial neutrality to something softer. She read aloud, her voice carrying through the courtroom. Dear Marcus, if you're reading this, you found the records. You know what I did here. You know what it cost me. I've watched you from distance. Your father wouldn't allow closer contact. I've seen your loneliness, your isolation. I recognize it because I lived it too. When you do what's right against your family's wishes, they cut you off. It's the price of principle. I'm leaving you this property because you're the only one who might understand. The only one who knows what it means to stand alone. The only one who might care enough to fight for truth when easier path is to walk away. Your father, my son, betrayed me. He reported me to federal authorities because he feared social consequences. I forgave him, but I never forgot. You don't owe me anything. We barely knew each other, but if you choose to honor this place, to tell these stories, you'll be continuing the work I started, and you'll no longer be alone in your purpose. I'm sorry for the burden, but you're the only one who might care enough to fight. With hope, your grandfather, Samuel Webb. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Claire was openly crying. Emma gripped the edge of the witness box. Even Victor looked shaken. This letter demonstrates clear testamentary capacity. Judge Morrison set the document down carefully. Samuel Webb knew exactly what he was doing and why. His reasoning was sound, his intent explicit. Bradford made one final desperate attempt. Your Honor, we question the letter's authenticity. The handwriting. We anticipated that. Linda produced samples from Samuel's journals, handwriting analysis from experts. They match perfectly. We also have nursing home staff prepared to testify Samuel was mentally sharp until his final week. Judge Morrison had heard enough. Samuel Webb's will is valid. He was of sound mind. His intent was clear. He chose Marcus Webb as heir for specific, articulated reasons. The petition to contest is denied. Relief flooded through Marcus. But Bradford wasn't finished. Your Honor, even if the will stands, petitioner requests court-imposed conditions under estate law. The property was abandoned for 20-plus years. It could be deemed derelict. We request the court require performance bond, proof of financial capacity to restore and maintain property without becoming public hazard. Judge Morrison considered. That's reasonable. She reviewed documents on her desk. Mr. Webb, can you post bond for estimated restoration costs? How much, Your Honor? Linda's voice was carefully neutral. The judge consulted an appraisal report. $200,000 to stabilize structure, restore basic systems, ensure property is not public hazard. Marcus's stomach dropped. He had $60,000 total. Even mortgaging his apartment, borrowing against his pension, he'd fall catastrophically short. Victor smiled. He'd won after all, just differently than expected. I'll post the bond, Your Honor. Marcus heard himself say it despite the impossibility. Linda pulled him aside, whispering urgently, Marcus, you don't have that kind of money. I'll figure it out. You have 30 days to post $200,000 or property will be placed in receivership and auctioned. Judge Morrison's gavel fell. Case adjourned. Outside the courthouse, Victor approached. His expression held grim satisfaction. You won, Marcus. Congratulations. But you can't afford to keep it. In 30 days, it'll go to auction and I'll buy it. All this was for nothing. Emma glared at him with fierce 10-year-old intensity. You're a bully. Victor actually flinched, looked at his great-great-niece, then walked away without responding. Claire hugged Marcus tightly. Dad, what are you going to do? I don't know yet. Linda's office became their war room. She laid out the brutal mathematics. Marcus had $60,000 in savings and retirement accounts. He could mortgage his apartment for maybe $80,000 of equity. That gave him $140,000, still $60,000 short, and that's before lawyer fees, before my retainer. Linda didn't sugarcoat it. You'd be risking everything. If the foundation fails, if restoration costs exceed estimates, you're bankrupt and homeless. Dr. Whitmore made his offer. University will contribute $100,000, but only if you donate the property to a foundation. We can't give money to a private individual. The terms were clear. Marcus would establish the Samuel Webb Foundation as nonprofit. University contributes funding. Marcus serves as director with modest salary, $45,000 yearly. Property becomes historical site and educational center. Marcus could live in the restored section but wouldn't own it. So I give up ownership to save it. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. You give up ownership to give it purpose. Dr. Whitmore's voice held conviction. Isn't that what Samuel would have wanted? Claire spoke up. I have $20,000 saved. You can have it. No, Claire. That's your security. I'm not asking permission. Emma and I are part of this now. Her voice was firm, no room for argument. Hank cleared his throat. I can contribute $10,000, and I'll do all carpenter work for free. That's worth another $30,000 in labor. Linda calculated. Marcus $60,000 plus apartment, mortgage for $80,000, Claire $20,000, Hank $10,000 in cash plus $30,000 in labor. University $100,000. That's $300,000 total. Wait, Marcus interrupted. That's more than required. Linda smiled slightly. Restoration always runs over budget. Better to have cushion. But Marcus, understand what you're committing to. You'll mortgage your home, drain your savings, work for nonprofit salary. One emergency and you're ruined. The alternative is letting Victor bulldoze Samuel's legacy. The room fell silent. Then Claire reached across and took her father's hand. We'll make it work, as family. Emma hugged them both. Mystery team doesn't give up. Marcus signed the papers. 30 days to transform dreams into legal reality. The restoration began in earnest. Hank brought construction crews, men he'd worked with for decades, willing to accept reduced rates. Claire created a website, established social media presence, reached out to historical societies and preservation groups. Emma appointed herself documentation specialist. She photographed everything with a disposable camera, creating a visual record of transformation. Before and after shots, workers mid-repair, small details that told the larger story. By week 2, the house no longer looked abandoned. New roof sections replaced collapsed areas. Windows no longer gaped empty. The foundation was reinforced with proper drainage. Electrical systems were inspected and upgraded where necessary. Plumbing, dormant for decades, was coaxed back to life. Emma set up a lemonade stand in town on Saturday, her own fundraising initiative. A hand-lettered sign read, "Help Save Samuel's Sanctuary," with her drawing of the mansion. She raised $380 and insisted every penny go to the foundation. When local news covered it, 10-year-old fighting to preserve great-great-grandfather's legacy, donations began arriving. Small amounts mostly, $5 here, $20 there. But they added up. 15,000 from strangers moved by the story. Claire organized a gala fundraiser. Tickets $100, expecting 50 attendees. 180 showed up. The event raised $18,000. A cellist performed a piece written by a composer Samuel had sheltered. A painter exhibited work inspired by Harold Finch's landscapes. Past and present wove together. Marcus worked 16-hour days, lost 15 pounds. His hands developed calluses he hadn't had since his 20s, but exhaustion felt purposeful. This mattered. Victor appeared one afternoon without warning. Marcus was on the roof with Hank replacing shingles. His uncle stood in the drive, looking up. "Can I see what you've done?" Marcus climbed down, wary. Victor walked through the house in silence. Stopped at the exhibit panels Dr. Whitmore's students had installed. Photographs, letters, historical context. Paused longest at the section documenting the FBI investigation. The Betrayal by James and Charles Webb. "I didn't know." Victor's voice was barely audible. "Not until the trial. My father never told me. I grew up thinking Grandfather Samuel was eccentric, possibly disloyal. I believed the family story. He was a hero, I know that now." Victor turned to face Marcus, "And I'm ashamed. Of my father, of myself for fighting you. You were right to expose this. It wasn't about being right. It was about being truthful." Victor nodded slowly. "I can't undo the damage. Can't take back the legal, seeing the things I said. But," he gestured at the restored rooms, "you've done something remarkable here." Samuel would be proud. He left without asking forgiveness. Marcus understood. Some breaches couldn't be repaired, only acknowledged. The 30th day arrived. The foundation was legally established. The university transferred its funding. Marcus had mortgaged everything he owned. The bond was posted with hours to spare. Linda called with the news. "It's official. You own nothing and control everything. Welcome to nonprofit management." Claire brought champagne, non-alcoholic since it was barely noon, and they toasted in the study. To Samuel, to impossible dreams, to family. The grand opening was scheduled for mid-May. Marcus had 3 weeks to finish the transformation. The final days were chaos. Exhibits installed, walls painted, gardens partially restored. Emma planted flowers where Samuel's guests had grown them in the 1930s, using old photographs as guides. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Opening day arrived with unseasonable warmth and brilliant sunshine. The banner hung over the entrance, "Samuel Webb Sanctuary, Historical Site and Educational Center." Marcus stood on the front steps in his best suit, the same one he'd worn to his grandfather's funeral, now fitting looser after weeks of physical labor. Claire did final media checks. Emma bounced with barely contained excitement. Hank supervised last-minute details with military precision. The first cars began arriving at 9. By 10, over 100 people had gathered. By 11, they'd stopped counting. Over 200 attendees, parking overflow extending down the road. Ruth Adler came with 3 generations of family. David Kowalski arrived with children and grandchildren. Professor Levin's daughter flew in from California. Descendants of 12 different families Samuel had helped. Town residents, historians, university faculty, media from 3 newspapers and 2 television stations. Owen appeared unexpectedly, driving from the coast with his wife and 2 children. Marcus hadn't seen his son in 18 months. "I read about this online." Owen's voice was tentative. "I had to come. Dad, I'm sorry I disappeared. You're here now." They embraced. Owen's kids, 5 and 7, stared wide-eyed at the mansion. "You live here now, Grandpa?" "I do." "Cool." The ceremony began at 11. The mayor welcomed everyone, acknowledged the property's importance to town history. Dr. Whitmore provided historical context. Depression-era sanctuary networks. Holocaust rescue operations, Samuel's specific contributions. Then Ruth Adler spoke. Sarah helped her to the podium, adjusted the microphone. Ruth's voice shook but carried. I am 91 years old. In 1938, I was 7. My family fled Vienna with nothing. Samuel Webb gave us sanctuary. He gave us hope. He gave us life. I've waited 86 years to properly thank him. She looked directly at Marcus. Samuel Webb, wherever you are, thank you. Your kindness saved us. And now, thanks to your grandson Marcus, your story will save others. Not physically, but spiritually. You'll inspire people to help when helping is hard. That's a legacy worth preserving. Standing ovation. Marcus couldn't see through tears. He spoke next, unprepared but honest. 6 months ago, I inherited a falling apart mansion I didn't want. I was 61, divorced, estranged from my children, working a job that paid bills but meant nothing. My life felt empty. My grandfather, a man I barely knew, left me this property, and my family cut me off for inheriting it. He gestured at the restored house. Then I found the letters, the ledger, the evidence of what Samuel did here. Quietly, without recognition, he saved lives. Artists, families, refugees. He gave them sanctuary when the world offered nothing. My father was ashamed of him. My uncle tried to erase his legacy, but I couldn't, because Samuel wasn't leaving me property. He was leaving me purpose. Marcus looked at Emma, at Claire, at the crowd. The last 6 months have been the hardest of my life. I've risked everything I have. I've fought my own family in court. I've sacrificed my savings, my security, my comfortable retirement, and I'd do it again, because this matters. Samuel showed me that one person acting on principle can make a difference, that helping others is worth the cost. That legacy isn't about money or property. It's about the lives you touch, the example you set, the truth you honor. His voice grew stronger. I didn't know my grandfather, but I know him now, and I'm proud to continue his work. The applause was thunderous. Claire was sobbing with pride. Owen held his children, teaching them about their heritage. Even strangers in the crowd were moved. Emma surprised everyone by walking to the microphone. She'd prepared her own speech, written in her careful 10-year-old handwriting. Hi, I'm Emma. I'm 10. When Grandpa Marcus got the house, everyone was mad at him. My mom was mad. Uncle Victor was really mad. Even I didn't understand. But then I found clues. A tin under a bed, letters from kids like me, a flower that lasted 85 years. She looked out at the crowd with complete confidence. Samuel helped people when nobody else would. The FBI tried to stop him. His own son betrayed him. But he didn't quit. Grandpa Marcus is like Samuel. Uncle Victor tried to stop him. People said he should give up. But he didn't quit either. Emma's voice rang clear. I'm proud to be part of Webb family now. Not because we're rich or important, because Samuel taught us that helping people is more important than being safe. When I grow up, I want to be like Samuel and like Grandpa Marcus. They showed me that one person can make a difference. The crowd erupted. Marcus had to sit down, overwhelmed. Emma ran to him and he held her while the applause continued. Tours began. Visitors moved through exhibits. Children asked questions. Elderly survivors shared memories. Historians took notes. Media conducted interviews. The most powerful moment came when a young girl, maybe 8, asked Marcus a question. Did your grandfather know he was a hero? No, I don't think he did. But you know, yes. And now you know too. I want to be like him when I grow up. That, Marcus realized, was the real legacy. Not preserving past, but inspiring future. Evening arrived. Most visitors had left. Marcus, Claire, Owen, and their families stayed. Walked the grounds together. 5 children, Marcus's grandchildren, ran through restored gardens, their laughter filling spaces that had been silent for decades. Owen admitted he'd stayed away because seeing Marcus alone after the divorce was painful. Reminded him of his own marriage struggles. I was a coward. You're here now. That's what matters. Claire reflected on her own transformation. I spent years focused on career, ignoring relationships. Watching you fight for this, prioritizing meaning over money, it changed how I see success. The children played as sunset golden over the estate. Marcus watched them and felt the completion of something. Samuel had given desperate people sanctuary. Marcus was giving Samuel's memory sanctuary. The circle was complete. Linda arrived with final financial reports. First-month projections exceeded expectations. Donations still coming in. School groups booking tours through autumn. Universities securing grants for expanded exhibits. Foundation is financially stable. Relief washed through Marcus. It was working. Dr. Whitmore announced an academic article about Samuel's network would be published, already generating significant interest in private rescue efforts during the Holocaust. Future plans took shape. Educational coordinator to be hired. Summer internship program for college students. Oral history project recording survivors' testimonies. Partnership with Holocaust museums. Annual lecture series. Scholarships for refugee students. Marcus's personal future was modest but secure. Salary covered basic expenses. Living quarters in the restored East Wing were comfortable if not luxurious. Claire visited weekly with Emma. Owen was relocating closer within 6 months. Even Diane had called to congratulate him. 3 days later, early morning, Marcus drove to the cemetery, small plot outside town where Samuel was buried. Simple headstone. Samuel Webb, 1897-1984. Beloved father and grandfather. Nothing about his real legacy. Marcus placed a stone, Jewish tradition of remembrance, then added a small brass plaque he'd had made. Samuel Webb, hero, humanitarian, savior of lives. The sanctuary you built stands again. The work continues, your grandson Marcus. He spoke aloud to the grave. You gave me more than property. You gave me purpose. You showed me that one person can make a difference, that standing alone for what's right is worth the cost. I wish I'd known you, but I know you now. Through every letter, every name in that ledger, every life you touched, you weren't just my grandfather. You were someone worth honoring. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for believing I could do this. I won't let you down. Footsteps approached. Emma appeared, Claire waiting by the car. Grandpa? Mom said you'd be here. They'd come together. Emma placed her own stone on the grave, small, painted with careful flowers. Hi, great-great-grandpa Samuel. We fixed your house. It's beautiful now. Lots of people came to see it. Grandpa Marcus says you'd be proud. I think he is. Emma took Marcus's hand. Grandpa Marcus? When I grow up, I'm going to work at the sanctuary, so Samuel's work never stops. I'd like that. And I'm going to teach my kids about him. So they teach their kids. So he's never forgotten. Marcus understood then. Legacy wasn't buildings or documents. It was this 10-year-old girl who understood what mattered, who'd carry the story forward. Samuel had saved lives in the 1930s. Emma would save his memory for the next century. They walked back to the car where Claire waited. 3 generations together. Marcus was 61, financially modest, working harder than ever. But he wasn't empty anymore. Not lost, not alone. He had family, had purpose, had legacy to protect. As they drove back to the estate, Marcus thought about Samuel's words. You'll no longer be alone in your purpose. The old man had been right. Marcus wasn't doing this alone anymore. He was doing it with family, with community, with everyone who believed some things were worth fighting for regardless of cost. For the first time in years, Marcus Webb knew exactly who he was supposed to be. The sanctuary stood ready to welcome its next visitors. The work that Samuel began in 1931, that Marcus resurrected in 2024, would continue. Stories would be told. History would be honored. Lives would be changed, not through shelter now, but through inspiration. Some legacies are worth any sacrifice. Some truths demand telling no matter how uncomfortable. Some houses hold more than rooms and walls. They hold the possibility of who we might become if we're brave enough to care. Marcus had been brave enough, and in being brave, he'd found himself again. The work continues.
Jet ist low.
So war ein Main.
Wurde nochmal gedartet. Move. OB.
Rainer Flash.
Mach mal mit zur Wall hoch zur Ablenkung. Leute, die
weg.
können.
Rainer Backside.
Backside.
Viper raus. Einer Backside.
Ah.
Ja,
Jet ist low.
Nice.
Ich glaube beide. Ich bin mal
Ich gehe für die Flankierung.
es müssen beide sein, es müssen beide sein.
Die können aber noch rotieren. Die können noch rotieren.
One enemy
Yep.
remaining.
Who's
Nice.
like on side?
Okay, nice. Schön. Auf jetzt. Geil, geil, geil. Let's go. Let's go. Auf geht's, Team. Wir sind besser.